Chris, it's John from the Batcave podcast. How you doing?
I'm doing good. How are you doing, John?
Good. Listen, I've got some new episodes coming up, and I want to do a special episode on Wonder Woman on TV.
Wonder Woman.
Oh, wow, man, I am in. I can talk about Linda Carter all day. Let's do it. Put me down.
Now, hang on. It's not the Wonder Woman TV show.
Okay. Yeah, well, I can talk about Kathy Lee Crosby. We got Ricardo Montalban as a villain, so I'm in for that, too.
Yeah, no. This is, okay, maybe, Batcave podcast, it's not Kathy Lee Crosby. We're going to talk about the Elliewood Walker pilot. Hello? Hello? Welcome back, citizens, to an all-new episode of the Batcave podcast. It's your old bat chum, John S. Drew here, and yes, we're done with the series. We've completed all the reviews. You'd think that should be it, right? But no, it's not, because the career of William Dozier went on. The careers of Adam West, Burt Ward, Julie Newmar, Yvonne Craig, they all went on. And there are aspects of their life that in some way had an influence on our culture still, whether it was Batman related or something else they did that might even remind us of Batman. And because of that, I'm going to continue the podcast here, and we're going to be doing these series of episodes from the files of the Batcomputer. And the first one we're going to be doing is taking a look at the very brief, and thank God for that, 1967 pilot for Wonder Woman that William Dozier produced. Now, this is one of those ones that when I put out the call, there wasn't a whole lot of, hey, I'll take it on. And yet someone who I guess is a glutton for punishment decided to take the reins on this one and join me. Once again, welcome back to the podcast, one of the hosts, the co-host of the Supermates podcast. And from what I understand, you've also started up a new Batman podcast, Mr. Chris Franklin. Hey, Chris.
Hey, John. And yes, I am the Mike Rowe of the Batcave podcast. I do the dirty jobs.
Yeah, Nora Clavicle and now this.
Yeah, actually, I do have a new Batman-related podcast. It is called Batman Nightcast. It is on the Fire and Water podcast network, just like Supermates. And that is a show that I host with my friend Ryan Daly, and we talk about Batman comics beginning in 1986 during the post-crisis era of Batman. So that's when Denny O'Neil came in as editor, and you get things like Batman Year One and a new origin for Jason Todd and everything else that follows with that.
Now, let me ask you something. I don't know if I asked you this the last time. You're happy with and able to make the distinction between all the different versions of Batman, I take it.
Mm-hmm.
Because
yes.
there are some fans who have a problem with that.
Oh, yeah, I know. It's I can pretty much reconcile almost every version of Batman. There's some extremes that I'm really not real happy with, like, well, I'll just say there's things about Batman v Superman I wasn't happy with their portrayal of Batman. There's extremes that I don't really appreciate, but for the most part, yeah, I look at it as, every era has its own Batman, and I can appreciate it, put it in its context, and in the case of even revisiting that, like the Batman 66 comic or the great Batman Return of the Caped Crusaders movie, I can look at that and say, hey, this worked then and it still works, So, yeah, I'm very open. But like you said, a lot of people aren't.
Yeah. And it's funny, too, because now that I think about it, as you're saying that, every era has its Batman. I guess every era has its Wonder Woman, too, as we see with this preview, I don't even know if it's really fair to say it's a pilot because it's only all of 5 minutes that was shot.
Right. It's almost like more like it's like a test. It's not a screen test because I'm pretty certain they knew who they were going to go with, but it's like, it's just a test almost to see if it would work. And I mean, I'm assuming they did this to show ABC and other potential networks if ABC wasn't interested. But yeah, it's really odd because I mean, obviously when they did the Batgirl bit, they knew that they had a place to put Batgirl. Obviously, they could, they were going to work her into the series, and it was just more to show, hey, this is what we're doing to freshen up the show. With this, I don't really know what you would call this. I've heard it called a pilot. I've heard it called a screen test, but it's like a pilot test. It's like a test pilot, I guess. So this should be a Green Lantern thing and not Wonder Woman.
Well, it's weird too because, like you say, when back in '65 when they did the screen tests, those weren't pilots; they were screen tests for Adam West and Lyle Wagner. They had a commitment from ABC; they were going to get the show. They just had to figure out who was going to be in the cast. Like you said, they knew that Elliewood Walker was going to play Wonder Woman, so. And I guess they didn't have the commitment yet from ABC to go to series. So it's kind of weird. What was the purpose of this footage? Because it really, in just watching it, it certainly doesn't show you if the show had any potential.
No, it actually raises more questions than probably, I mean, you might on paper say, oh, a Wonder Woman series. If you knew anything about Wonder Woman, you might say, oh, that worked. Because obviously we know later Wonder Woman in a fairly faithful adaptation, at least at first, did work. But what you get actually is like, okay, why did you choose to go in that direction?
Yeah.
It's a head scratcher.
It's a head scratcher. And then it's also just, you look at, I mean, right off the bat, in the very beginning, when the thing opens and the music's playing, they show an issue of Wonder Woman. It's issue 156. And I had to wonder, because we hear the stories of how William Dozier read the Batman comics and he hit upon what he thought was the best way to go about this. Did reading that issue or similar issues around it give him this idea? I mean, granted, the plot of the issue, I was trying to track it down and I couldn't. And it had something to do with a fight with a brain pirate. Which may have tipped him off at that this is even more absurd than Batman. I don't know.
Robert Kanigher, who was the writer-editor during that period, he had taken over the writing chores on Wonder Woman back in the late 40s when the creator, William Moulton Marston, had passed away. And a few years before this pilot was made, he had the sales were down and he had decided to kind of shake things up, and he went in a more whimsical direction with the comic, and it seemed like he was trying to target like younger girls, and he had Wonder Woman as Wonder Girl, almost like Superman with Superboy. That worked for DC. They had several series that showed Superman as a boy, even though it contradicted previous stories. So they had Wonder Woman as Wonder Girl. They eventually had her an even younger version as Wonder Tot. And he even did these strange stories where they all existed together at the same time, which, he framed it originally with it was an imaginary story. And then later on, he just said, oh, the heck with it, they're all together. And that caused confusion at DC later, as how Wonder Girl ended up in the Teen Titans as a contemporary of Robin, even though she should have been the past version of Wonder Woman. And if you're a DC Comics fan, it just created all this. They still never have been able to figure out how to reconcile it completely. But he also had some weird, pretty campy elements, such as suitors for Wonder Woman. There was a mer boy, a bird boy, and then the adult versions of them in the Wonder Woman stories. There was crazy villains like Egg Fu, who was a awful Chinese stereotype. He was a communist giant egg with a big handlebar mustache that worked like tentacles. I mean, it's bizarre. I mean, there's just no two ways to say it. But I was reading Les Daniels' Wonder Woman: The Complete History, And Kanigher said that somebody from the TV production office, I'm assuming from Greenway, came to DC, and Jack Leibowitz, who was the publisher, called him in, and they said, well, we want to do a Wonder Woman show. And he told him, he said, well, don't camp it up. Wonder Woman's already camp. So he knew Wonder Woman that he was doing was campy. So I don't know if that influenced their decision to go from the Batman approach to straight just comedy like this thing is, or what. I don't know.
like this thing is this comedy?
It's trying to be comedy, I think.
It's funny too, because there are so many parallels with Batman with this little brief thing and the timing of it, because wasn't it also around 1967 that the comic took the radical shift of taking her powers away and everything?
It was right after this, because Kanigher had actually, a few months before I think this started filming, he had jettisoned all those crazy things in the comics, all the Mer Boys and Bird Boys and Egg Foos. And he had decided to do a back to basics approach and go back to like the Golden Age type Wonder Woman stories. And that didn't go over very well. And it was shortly after that yes, DC, Kanigher was out the door as far as on the Wonder Woman book. They brought in new editor, new writer, new artists, and they did the whole, she loses her powers. She becomes basically Emma Peel, and she becomes a karate chopping, normally white suited wearing Wonder Woman of the late 60s through early 70s. So, yeah.
And it's interesting, too, because that would be the sort of route that eventually the Kathy Lee Crosby movie would take.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. I mean, so people look at the Kathy Lee Crosby Wonder Woman pilot and say, well, that's not very Wonder Woman-like, but it's actually not too far from the comics that were being done. And it's another odd coincidence, I think, right as they were filming that, or it was airing, that's when they switched back to the classic Wonder Woman in the comics. So they never could quite get that synergy going.
Oh, man. And I'm looking at this. It's funny, too, because, okay, I don't know who Stan Hart is, but Stanley Ralph Ross had a hand in working on this, and Larry Siegel. Now, Larry Siegel, I know I should know that name, and I can't think of where I've seen it before for the life of me. Plus, we've got Leslie Martinson as the director.
Mm-hmm. Directed the Batman movie, of all things.
Yeah, and the pilot for Batman.
Yeah.
It's like, what?
Well, I had to look up who Siegel and Hart were. I wasn't familiar with them, but apparently they had written for Mad Magazine, which explains this reads like a Mad Magazine bit or a comedy skit, and they went on to write for the Carol Burnett show. So this would definitely, you could see Carol Burnett actually in this scenario. I mean, you can see this as a skit, with her dressed this Wonder Woman fawning in the camp into the mirror, and some,
Vicki
model
Lawrence
they brought
as
in.
his mother.
Vicki Lawrence as Mama. Yeah. Wonder Woman's family. And then of course you've got the strange connection down the road where you've got they worked on Carol Burnett show, and of course who was the star on Carol Burnett show? Lyle Wagner, who was of course connected to Batman and then went on to play Steve Trevor on the Linda Carter Wonder Woman series. So some incestuous stuff going on here.
Yeah. Oh, let's take a few moments. I mean, because I don't know if it'll take that long, but let's break this down as we do here on the Batcave podcast. This thing opens up, like I said, we see the comic book, we see the weird titling of Elliewood Walker's name on the screen, which I also thought was interesting, and then we cut to her house, and it's a stormy night, and Diana's reading the paper when sections of it seem to fall out. And already it's not a very auspicious beginning as she struggles to steady herself and asks her mother to help her up.
Yeah, I mean, it's like this woman can't, figure out the simple mechanics of her body. So how can she be a superhero? I don't know.
Yeah.
Thank you. It seems so quiet here tonight. Well, thank goodness it's raining. There are no planes out tonight making all that Noise. Oh, that's it. It's raining cats and dogs. Steve's plane must be grounded. Mother, I won't be having any dinner tonight.
No dinner?
No.
Oh, don't be silly. Where do you think all that strength comes from? Those gods? No, from my cooking.
I have to help Steve. He's waiting at the airport and there are no planes.
Look, you're not so smart that you can't take a mother's advice. Now, this is no kind of a night for you to be flying around in that outfit of yours.
Mother.
This is the kind of a night for you to watch TV or read the newspaper, eat your roughage.
But the fate of the free world depends on me.
All right. Eat first. Save the free world later.
And I gotta ask, is her mother Hippolyta?
That's a good question. She said, like, she points to those gods and how old she is, so she knows of her powers and that she's Wonder Woman, obviously. So, yeah, is she Hippolyta? Is she some human? Is she like the Martha Kent type that took her in this version? Or I don't know. That's the biggest head scratcher. I can't imagine she's some version of Queen Hippolyta, but who knows what they were thinking.
Yeah. Well, she wants Diana to find a man.
Well, that's true, yeah. And the Amazons of Paradise Island were pretty much, now we don't need any men.
Yeah.
So.
And they set up this thing. It's like, they mention Steve. I don't remember if they say his last name, but she does mention Steve by name and how he's supposed to be flying, but the storm will ground his plane. And then she says he's in danger or something. And I'm like thinking, didn't you say he'd be grounded? It's like, it should just wait for the storm to pass. There doesn't seem to be that much danger, but she and her mother get into it, how she's got to go save Steve and she, the fate of the world and all that kind of stuff. And it's all done, a little bit over the top.
Yeah, the mom's like, she's got a pot and she's like spooning soup into her bowl. And then Diana starts, she sips out more soup than actually the mom puts in, I think, which is the only reason I noticed that is because I watched this. I tortured myself and watched it 3 or 4 times just to make sure I caught everything. But it's stuff like that in movies that always gets me. It's like, yeah, they're not really eating anything or drinking anything, so. But yeah, that whole deal of whether he's grounded or not, I think I read that the plot involved like some kind of computer sabotage, which would have been interesting in the 60s. But so maybe Steve had some information that he had to get off somewhere, some top secret info, and that's why it was so urgent that she made sure his plane took off, or who knows? Because we only get this brief little excerpt from the script. So
well, wait a minute. You said you read though, so there was a little bit more of an explanation of like a plot.
Well, as far as I know, there's I didn't find it, but apparently there was an existing script written. There was a whole script for the pilot written, and my understanding was that according to Les Daniels' Wonder Woman book, Dozier did not think the script was suitable, had Stanley Ralph Ross come in and doctor it, and it made me think, okay, it was worse than this before? And Stanley Ralph Ross couldn't fix it? Come on, he wrote some great Catwoman episodes, but I think so apparently there's a script floating around out there. I didn't really go digging for it because maybe I just there's only so much punishment even I can take, John, but but apparently it existed at one point anyway. So,
wow. Now you've got me wanting to go down that rabbit hole, because that was the one thing that actually, as I was watching this, there were little things that I said, I could see this being a series if some of the, let's say most of the absurdity had been taken out. And I'll get into that as we get towards the end about like what caught my eye that like, oh, that's an interesting plot thread, or that might be something there, or what were they thinking? So, they bicker back and forth and they're arguing and stuff. And that's the main gist of this whole thing, is the relationship, showing the relationship with Diana and her mother more than anything. That, and then of course, probably even more painful to the Wonder Woman fans is when she makes her transformation. She goes through a spinning door, coming out the other side as Wonder Woman. Dozier does this whole, and of course, because God forbid we, couldn't do without Dozier. And I love him, but frankly, that was the one thing that bothered me with the Green Hornet was him doing the introduction. He should not have had his hands on it at all, or I should say his vocal tones. And it shouldn't be here either, because as funny as the lines are, I guess, maybe, it's, again, you're thinking you're going to get Batman, and this is even worse than third season Batman.
Wonder Woman, who knows she has the strength of Hercules, who knows she has the wisdom of Athena, who knows she has the speed of Mercury, and who thinks she has the beauty of Aphrodite.
Yeah, exactly. His voice means you're going to get a certain brand of satire, parody, whatever you want to call it. And so with the Green Hornet being pretty serious, it doesn't fit. And then with this being just an out-and-out farce, it doesn't fit either.
Right, yeah. Then she steps out, and we hear, and again, it's like, wow, the opening strains to the movie theme song for Batman.
Yes. I was waiting for the spotlight to shine on two people making out,
Yes. And then it just, if you thought that was bad, it just goes completely downhill as Wonder Woman goes up to the mirror after Dozier announces that she thinks she's as beautiful as Athena and starts preening in front of the camera. And we get the old mirror game where she and her reflection, and the reflection is this distorted view she has of herself, in which Wonder Woman there in the reflection's played by Linda Hamilton, or I'm sorry, Linda Harrison, not Linda Hamilton. Oh, and this cheesy 20s, 30s music starts playing. It's all brass and such, and it's as she just keeps preening for a good minute or so.
Yeah, it like takes up like a whole minute of the like 4 minutes and 45 seconds the pilot is, or whatever it is. It's really kind of hard to watch. I mean, and the thing is Elliewood Walker. Of course she's Hollywood unattractive. They put her in, glasses, big glasses, and frumpy clothes, and her hair's kind of a mess. And when she's Diana, and when she comes out as Wonder Woman, her outfit's too big. She's thin, so her outfit's too big. I mean, she's not unattractive, but she's not the Wonder Woman ideal. And
right.
Of course, Linda Harrison's costume fits her properly, and she does look more like the comic book Wonder Woman. Of course, she's Linda Harrison we know her as Nova from Planet of the Apes. She was in the Batman episode with the Joker Goes to School, 2-parter, and as a cheerleader. So, she's, of course, very attractive. But yeah, it's, of course, that raises... That's was deemed funny then. Nowadays people would it would be ripped off the air in 2 seconds for this part alone. So I mean, yeah, but even beyond that, if you put yourself in 1967, it's still hard to watch.
and it's funny too, because you point that out, that her costume doesn't fit her well and such, and yet they point it out. They make it a point in this to show the absurdity. It's like, when Batman first came on, frankly, if you look at Batman's costume, it doesn't fit him that well. But when Adam West speaks, when he walks into the room, you kind of ignore all that. He casts this almost illusion with his acting and such, and you're like, cool, that's Batman. Now, we're like, no, everybody point and laugh. That's ridiculous. Yeah. We're not taking these are two serious crime fighters in an absurd world. We're taking this is an absurd world and this is an absurd chick, and boom, we're done. Let's just mock this, and that's sad. That's sad.
It is. It's sad, and it really makes you wonder why DC would ever go for this. And maybe they wouldn't. Maybe that's one reason why it didn't go anywhere. But, because this is straight up mocking the character. And, it's I don't see, unless DC radically changed the way the book was going. Of course, they did anyway. But I mean, to follow this, if this had went to series, I know Batman did pick up more campier influences. Julius Schwartz felt like he had to, and that's one reason why you had after the series went off, they went the complete other way and started going back to the golden age creature of the night type phase of Batman. But with this Wonder Woman, I mean, they would have had to, change this into a Betty and Veronica comic to fit what was going on here, or even beyond that, more like a Betty and Veronica meets Mad Magazine type thing or something to match this.
And then there's the takeoff. I mean, this Wonder Woman flies.
Well, in the comics, Kanigher had introduced that she glided on air currents. They never wanted to say that she flew, but Wonder Woman from the 60s up into the 1980s could, quote unquote, glide on air currents, which I never. Okay, what is that? Is that like she gets a good run? She can, coast out or flying? Or I never did quite understand what that meant, but she was essentially flying. But yeah, the Elliewood Walker does not fly with any amount of grace, which is the gag. But yeah, it's pretty bad.
She does this little pirouette thing, and then there's some weird sound effects, and off she goes.
Yeah, it's a slide whistle type thing, and she sticks her legs out and just, it's like somebody just yanked her up. This is definitely not Superman the movie Takeoff, or something.
And then it ends.
Or even George Reeves' Springboard,
Right, exactly. And then it just cuts off. I mean, the mother comes out the window and says, "Stop by your uncle," and all that. But that's the end of it. Then it's all over, and it's like, okay, ABC, what do you think? Can we have a series? I mean, what?
It's like your kid comes to you with a proposal to buy a car. It's like, Dad, I got like $25. Can I get a car? No, son. Yeah, it really. What did they think this proved? I mean, beyond would this ever work? This excerpt, what did it show? I mean, I guess it showed the conceit that, hey, here's the gag. Wonder Woman thinks she's this gorgeous, Linda Harrison type, but she's not. And then you ask the question, how would that have worked? Would they have kept that going every time would she have to stop and look in a mirror, a window, some kind of reflective surface every so many minutes, so you'd see Linda Harrison and they'd give her enough to do to keep her on the payroll? Or, I mean, was it almost like an Incredible Hulk type thing where, at this minute Lou Ferrigno is going to show up and then wait another 20 minutes and he's going to show up again? Was it going to be that type of thing? Or, Linda Harrison will show up at these certain times in the episode, or what? I mean,
see, now you got me thinking of another aspect that they could have done. Because here's the thing. I know this is going to sound weird, but since you mentioned also there was a script, there's that part of me that actually does want to see what happens next. I want to see what Diana's relationship is like with Steve. I mean, she's clearly worried. I mean, to a certain extent, she has an affection for him. But then there's the mother's worries that she doesn't have a man. It's like, well, what about Steve if she's interested in Steve? I mean, so we don't even get into that there. And then is he, like we see often in the comics and stuff, is he more in love with Wonder Woman? And it's just that. Is there another woman? Were they going to do this as a triangle and such? And then you say, and maybe this could have saved the whole concept and not made it been as ugly as it seemed, with the whole thing with her preening in front of the mirror and stuff, is that actually she is Linda Harrison the whole time. And just what she actually perceives herself as most of the time is Ellie Walker, but that in reality she never gives herself enough credit because she has doubts about herself. I don't know. I mean, I'm thinking way too much. I'm sitting there going, we could have saved this. We could have fixed this, but no.
Well, I think the only way to fix this is just to make Linda Harrison Wonder Woman. Well, no offense to Elliewood Walker, but I would guess that, and I of course didn't read the script obviously, but my guess is when Steve ignores Diana completely, and Wonder Woman, he probably likes her help because apparently obviously she has superpowers, she can fly, she's got the strength of Hercules and all that stuff, but he probably wants her help, but he probably isn't interested in her because my guess is that everybody else sees her as Elliewood Walker, and only she sees her as the Aphrodite, vanity created Linda Harrison. So that's about all I can say. I think they said in Daniel's book that Wonder Woman. I don't know if they were going to show it, but the idea was the gods bestowed the Greek gods bestowed their powers on Wonder Woman's strength, wisdom and all that stuff. And Aphrodite, instead of in the comics, she gives her beauty. In this, she gave her vanity. So that's why she is so delusional that she thinks she looks like Linda Harrison when she doesn't. So my guess is Steve will be kind of like, yeah, thanks for the help, Wonder Woman. That was really helpful. But no, I really don't want to go out on a date. I've got, work at the Pentagon or, whatever. That's, which is the total opposite of the TV series where, Lyle Wagner has to roll his tongue back up in his head, every time Wonder Woman shows up on screen.
Oh, man. Now, wow. See, it's just this all just keeps rolling. Now I keep thinking you mentioned the gods and stuff. Would there have been almost like pre-Shazam where Diana and Wonder Woman would have been conversing with the gods, and would we have actually gotten people dressed as gods? Or I'm like thinking about this way too much, but then that's what I do here.
In the closet that she changes in, she's got the Oracle thing from the RV from Shazam,
the Eternity phone. Yeah.
The Eternity. Yeah, there you go. They call the Rock of Eternity and get the cartoon, moving mouth. But yeah, Ellie, that. I found out something interesting about Elliewood Walker doing, digging on IMDb. One,
right.
She was the wife of Robert Walker Jr., who most Star Trek fans will remember as Charlie Evans from the episode Charlie X.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. And oddly enough, she is from Maysville, Kentucky, which is right up the road from me. So, and I wonder if she's living there now.
I was wondering about that. It's one thing I didn't check up on. Is she still among us?
There's nothing on IMDb that says, there's no deceased date. So I'm assuming she's still among us as far as they know, at least. Anyway, of course, they're not always right, but
right.
But yeah, she was from Maysville, Kentucky. So, home of the birthplace of the Clooney clan, Rosemary and George. So there you go.
Wow.
Yeah. So another Batman, right? George Clooney.
Another George Clooney. Yeah, there you go.
Another Batman that most people would like to forget, just like this Wonder Woman.
Of course, now you got my wheels turning, thinking, see if we could track her down.
Yeah, that would be interesting. Her resume on IMDb is pretty brief. I heard her mention in other places that she was a comedian or comedian, I guess, and I couldn't really find anything on that. So I don't know if she was a stand-up type or a skit comedian, or she does come across almost like a Carol Burnett type in the brief sequence here, but she was in a few movies. Like she was in Easy Rider with her husband Robert Walker Jr. She was in Targets with Boris Karloff. So I mean, it's but that's really about it. She doesn't have a very lengthy IMDb resume, so she kind of just disappeared after a while.
Wow. That's now it's like more rabbit holes for me to explore. So, Chris, before we start wrapping this up here, was there anything else you wanted to discuss on this? Because I'm thinking we managed to actually get quite a bit out of a 5-minute piece.
Yeah, just one thing, when you brought up Stanley Ralph Ross, it always amazes me, and I did not know this for years and years, but I knew Stanley Ralph Ross as a writer on Batman. And he also developed the Wonder Woman series that Linda Carter was in. He was the guy that developed it for television and wrote the pilot.
Yes.
So he went on to, do legit Wonder Woman. But the weirdest thing is, of course, we know he played Ballpoint Baxter on Batman in a cameo.
Right.
But he went on to voice characters on animated cartoons, including DC characters, Gorilla Grodd and Brainiac on Super Friends. He was the second Brainiac after Ted Cassidy. Lurch, who of course was on Batman once, passed away, and he also voiced Perry White on the '80s Ruby Spears Superman cartoon, the 1988 series. So
I love that one.
He's got some. Yeah, that is a great one. Yeah, and he's got some serious DC cred for sure.
All right. Well, so in the end, okay, let's put this in some perspective then. Thank God it wasn't made. But would you ever go back to it again and look at it again? I mean, I never thought I would look at it again when I saw it years ago. I never thought I'd find myself watching it again, but here I was doing it for this.
I think it's kind of important to if you're thinking about Wonder Woman, if you're in our circles, if you're doing a piece on Wonder Woman on the TV show or even with the movie coming up. Of course, the Wonder Woman movie's coming out this year. To look back, where she came from, the fact that she had the Kathy Lee Crosby pilot, which a lot of people moan about, but apparently it had good enough ratings that they ordered the first Linda Carter pilot movie, even though they said, okay, we got to make some changes here. And then Wonder Woman went to series. They haven't been able to get anything off the ground with her as a solo act, as a cartoon. There's a cartoon pilot out there that was tied to a toy line that didn't make it to series. So, and then there's the 2011 Adrian Pilecki starring Wonder Woman pilot that I'm pretty sure you can go out on YouTube and watch, I think. So, I mean, it's really interesting that Wonder Woman has struggled to make it into media several times. It took a long time to get this movie off the ground after years and years and years of talking about doing a new Wonder Woman, the first Wonder Woman movie, theatrical movie. So it's part of that history. It's whether people want it to be or not. It's part of Wonder Woman's the trials of Wonder Woman, like Hercules, to get into media, I guess.
Yeah. All right, then. So as we wrap up this episode, Chris, I'll give you a moment here. You've got the new Batman podcast, but you also have Supermates. Tell us about that. Tell us what's going on over there at that podcast.
Well, actually, we just recorded an episode. It'll probably be out by the time this episode comes out. We actually come up on episode 66 of Supermates. So my wife, Cindy, and I, we co-host the show. We decided to do a Batman 66 themed episode. So I got the Batman, a celebration of the classic TV series coffee table book for Christmas that your buddy Dan Greenfield's been gushing about on his 13th Dimension. And that's one reason I wanted it so bad, because Dan kept putting all these great things from him. I'm like, God, I got to get this book. So it was number one on my Christmas list, and Cindy came through. So we talk about the book. I waited a bit to talk about Return of the Cape Crusaders in deference to your great coverage here on the Batcave podcast. But Cindy really wanted to talk about it, so we talk about Return of the Cape Crusaders. Cool. And I came up with a Batman quiz to give Cindy just a general, not trivia quiz, but who's your favorite villain, who was your favorite Catwoman, things like that. And so we're hoping people will play along at home and go over to fireandwaterpodcast.com and fill it out and let us know what their opinions are on it. So that's probably that'll be the latest episode when this hits, and it's definitely of interest to listeners here, so go check it out.
Definitely. And when the episode itself comes out, I'll put the links in our show notes and also up on the Facebook page.
Okay, and you can find that at fireandwaterpodcast.com, and we are on Twitter at #FWPodcast, and I have a Twitter at Supermates Pod. So.
All right, then. Thanks once again, Chris, for doing this again. I know it's like you just seem to take on the really bad ones.
I know you probably already got other people penciled in, but if you need another one, I will do Legends of the Superheroes, proving that I am a glutton for punishment.
Well, see, that's the thing with Legends of the Superheroes, and you know what? You're in, because frankly, you're taking 2 hits for the team. You're in. But to me, it's funny because there are a lot of people who are like, yeah, I'll do Legends. It's like, sure you will. It's so bad, it's good. Like, you can't.
Right.
This is just god-awful. Nora Clavicle was just god-awful. You know, Legends, that's going to be fun to make fun of and talk about and what have you, and maybe point out some things that as kids we enjoyed about it, but it's so bad it's good. So yeah, everybody's willing to do that one. But you took on 2 of the really bad ones here, so don't worry, you're in, my friend.
Okay, thanks. I think.
and you know, next time we're going to be doing Dick Tracy. That was another pilot that William Dozier did. And from what I understand, it's actually, because I've only seen bits and pieces of it, I have to sit down and give the whole thing a watch. It's actually not bad from what I understand.
Yeah, I watched bits of it the other day too, and I was really, for the first time, and I was really like, hey, why didn't this get picked up? That was my thought at the time. So.
Yeah, because, I mean, you've got Victor Buono as a guest star and all, and it seemed like it went off to a good start, but, you know, we'll see. And joining me to discuss Dick Tracy will be the return of Jim Beard to the podcast. So, folks, thanks for listening. Make sure you're heading on over to the Facebook page or to thebatcavepodcast.com, where in addition to our continuing episodes on the legacy of Batman 66, we're also continuing our reviews of the Green Hornet series for its 50th anniversary with the Hornet Sting podcast. So until next time, folks, thank you so much for listening. Once again, Chris, citizens, take care, everybody.
If you got time, stop by and say hi to your Uncle Amos.
Thanks for listening, chums. I don't have a bat phone, but you can contact the Batcave Podcast through its Facebook page, Twitter, email at thebatcavepodcast@gmail.com. Subscribe to the podcast via Libsyn.com. That's LIBSYN.com. Or through iTunes. The Batcave Podcast is part of a series of pop culture podcasts from the Chronic Rift Network. Find them at chronicrift.com. So until next time, citizens, same bat time, same Batcave Podcast.
Away, you vision of enchantment. You've got a job to do.